building a better Bay Area, moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC 7 News.
Hi there, thanks for joining us. I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC 7. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. So today, as California's drought concerns deepen, the lead scientist at UC Berkeley's Central Sierra Snow Laboratory says there are things we must do right now, and he'll be joining us live. Also, the latest crisis in the San Francisco Unified School District, weeks after teachers protested over a payroll system that left 1,000 teachers without pay. District officials respond to what went wrong and how to fix things going forward. We'll talk with a reporter with our media partner, the San Francisco Standard. But first, an historic confirmation. Today, the Senate voted to put Ketanji Brown Jackson on the nation's highest court, making her the first black woman to be a Supreme Court justice come next term.
On this vote, the yeas are 53, the nays are 47, and this nomination is confirmed.
And joining us now to discuss the historical nature of her ascension, the politics that made it a messy battle, and her influence on the court, ABC News political director Rick Klein. Rick, thanks for making the time today.
Thanks for having me. Good to be with you.
Soon to be Justice Brown Jackson, not just the first black woman to sit on the high court. This is historic on several levels, right?
That's right. And she's going to be joining the first ever court that is going to have white men as a minority. She's going to be the first time that we'll have this many women serving on the court, 4 out of the 9 justices, 2 black members at the same time. So there's a lot of barriers being broken through all of this. And of course, as you just saw right there, the Bay Area's own Vice President Harris, as the first black woman to be the vice president, got to call the vote. A little bit of history on its own. And I know the White House will be celebrating this moment tomorrow with President Biden and the vice president, and of course, Judge Jackson and her family.
All right. Well, the vote, 53-47, with 3 Republicans affirming her. That makes it technically bipartisan, but the process was anything but. Does this confirmation process, do you think it drove the 2 parties further apart?
Yeah, I think we saw a difference between the parties that was as stark as ever. There were those, the Democrats spent a lot of time championing her life story and her unquestioned qualifications for the job. She parried with all of the senators about all of the different constitutional questions. Republicans, of course, focused a lot on some obscure issues around child porn sentencing, around her defending some Guantanamo Bay suspects about 15 years ago, and some very odd questions around critical race theory. And the end result was that what you saw probably depended on where you sit and where your politics are. Then you've got the 3 Republicans who crossed over, Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, who often vote with Democrats, especially on judicial nominations, and then Senator Mitt Romney, who before Donald Trump was the most recent Republican nominee for president. The party's drifted quite a bit from his vision for it, but you heard in his decision really a yearning for a different kind of process, a different kind of Senate, where you could decide based on the qualifications of an individual instead of the political talking points of the moment. And I think the fact that there were 3 in some ways in today's politics, that's a lot. But in other ways, given that it used to be that you'd get 70, 80, 90 votes with regularity for a Supreme Court confirmation, it's kind of a sad state of polarized politics.
It really is. Look, but nonetheless, it's a big moment for President Biden. It's a campaign promise kept. Clearly, it brought him joy, right, to be able to deliver on that promise. Who else did this bring joy to?
Well, clearly you saw the Senate erupt in applause on that one side of the aisle. Democrats, I think, proud to be senators for at least this one day. As you mentioned, President Biden said during the campaign way back more than 2 years ago in the primaries that he would nominate a black woman to the first vacancy in the Supreme Court. No one's ever made a pledge like that before. And then making good on it, his friends and allies that were part of this, we saw the smile on Vice President Harris's face. I think a good portion of the Democratic base feels better about things as they stand. There were a big segment of the base that was lobbying for Justice Stephen Breyer to step aside, concerned that the Democrats wouldn't necessarily hold the Senate come next year, and that this was the time to do it. So the fact that they were able to get this done in pretty short order, we're sitting here with a couple months before the end of the term, Democrats had some maneuvering room, and they feel pretty good overall about having gotten this done.
I was just going to say, does this give the Democrats a big boost going into the midterms, both in terms of President Biden's promise kept and also just, they got something done?
It's not nothing, but it's also not everything. And I think people are going to move on from this like they do anything else. We've got 7 months before the midterms. Concerns around gas prices in Ukraine and all the rest will come back into view. But yes, the fact that a promise made was then kept, and a promise that I think is so important to so many millions of Americans who now see someone on the bench who looks a little bit more like them than they ever had before. It is, it's sort of a sad commentary on this country that it took us 240 odd years to get to a place where you could have a Black woman serving on the Supreme Court. Having a Supreme Court that looks more like the country is a goal that I think everyone, at least notionally, should get behind. And if you're a Democratic voter that's been wondering what Joe Biden has done for you, what the Biden-Harris team has done, this is a very tangible, very permanent, very historic notch on everyone's belt.
All right, let's talk a little bit about what, her joining the bench would mean. It doesn't really change the balance, of course, because she's replacing the outgoing Stephen Breyer, also on the liberal side of middle. But let's talk about what she could bring, how her life experiences do you see influencing the court, if you will?
Yeah, it is interesting because you can look at this on one level and say it's not consequential at all. You've got one liberal replacing another. You've still got a 6-3 majority of Republican appointees against Democratic appointees, and you can move on from there. But of course, the history of this makes it very consequential. And what we've learned over the years about Supreme Court picks is that the influence that they have right now doesn't tell you anything about where they're going to be down the road. And you can imagine a whole host of issues and a body of writing that gets built up over decades. She's only in her early 50s. She could easily serve for 30, 40 years on the high court. Long after today's political battles are gone, it's very hard to predict what's coming down the road, what's in the future. Some justices change over time, and often a court changes its direction based on the personality and the influence and the jurisprudence and the direction that individual justices take. So being as young as she is, with as many years ahead of her potentially on the court, you could see all manner of ways where Justice Jackson is going to be influential.
Let's look at what cases might come before the court next term when she actually takes to the bench: affirmative action, abortion rights, LGBTQ issues, gun restrictions, curriculums taught at school. These are all things that we've seen local or state battles recently that could all potentially go in front of the Supreme Court, right?
Yeah, and in fact, even with this current term, we're expecting rulings on some of these issues, including on abortion rights, including on affirmative action. It's interesting. There's one case involving Harvard University and affirmative action that Justice Jackson has said that she would recuse herself from because she is sat on the board of trustees over at Harvard. So all of these issues, I think, cut in different ways. And yes, the vote total isn't any different. You're still talking about the same number of considered liberal justices on the court, but the issues will always be changing. And there are some huge areas of American life at the state and local level that are working their way up through the courts. The issues around schools and curriculums are a big one. Everything around social issues. There's so much that's still out there for the court to work through. We don't even, I don't think, know what the influence of the Trump-dominated court is going to be. Justice Jackson adding her voice to that.
So, Rick, of course, she's the first Black woman, but she's also, I think, the first one who's been a public defender to become a justice, right? So how could that shape her thinking in whether it's criminal justice or other types of cases?
Yeah, that was an interesting quirk to hear about because, of course, it's such a prominent, important part of the law. She was pressed, as I mentioned earlier, about her role defending Guantanamo Bay suspected terrorists. And those are awful people. And it's not a fun job to do. But knowing the importance of representing a defendant and giving them those rights, I think, is important. And you heard some Democrats say that degree of understanding where they come from is an important perspective to bring. That it's important for judges not to be in ivory towers. So many of them, including Judge Jackson, I should mention, have this Ivy League pedigree. But the idea that you've been out there in the world and seen the impact of the law at that very visceral base level of being a public defender, I think maybe changes your perspectives a little bit. Seeing those defendants as human beings who are entitled to the rights and privileges that are afforded to them under the Constitution. Mm-hmm. It's not something that you see if you spend your time only hanging out with other judges or in the world of academia with the high-minded writings.
You know, you hear a lot about how the justices, even if they're on opposite ends of the philosophical spectrum, right? You could say right, left, whatever, that they're close friends oftentimes in real life and that they have lunch together. So do you think it is possible that she could influence her colleagues just through the interactions in a way that maybe none of us can foresee or expect?
100%. I mean, I think there's few justices who say that their whole outlook on how they approach the Constitution changed because of a friendship that they made. And no one thought that Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg influenced each other just because they went to the opera together, which they did, or they traveled to exotic locales together with their families, which they also did. But seeing someone else as a human being, I think, does change the way you approach things and maybe how stridently you might criticize the other side. Look, these are men and women on the high court that have studied the law and been part of the law for many, many decades. And I don't think getting to the Supreme Court makes you any more likely to change any of your particular worldviews. But what you can't ever underestimate is that at the end of the day, these are 9 men and women who meet behind closed doors on their own to hash things out. They very often don't agree on the biggest issues of the day, and sometimes that spills over into searing opinions that are even personally biting. But if they can get along, if they can understand where they're coming from, it does change a bit the way the law is applied. And I think knowing that she's got so much time to establish herself in the decades to come means you really never know where it's going to head.
All right, ABC News Political Director Rick Klein, thank you so much. Always appreciate chatting
My pleasure.
with you.
Thank
care.
you. Thanks.
Coming up next, we are talking to the lead scientist from UC Berkeley's Snow Lab about the latest snow survey and what it means for California's drought conditions. We'll be right back.
In commercial break.
All right, everybody, hot day. Stay hydrated. Time to talk about the drought. Let me prepare for that conversation. Coming right up. Welcome back. California's drought is getting worse, according to the latest snow survey. Officials recorded the statewide snowpack at 38%, which is 23% lower than last year's snowpack. So how much should we be concerned, and where do we go from here? Joining us now to shed some light on the issue is the lead scientist at UC Berkeley's Snow Lab, Dr. Andrew Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, let's start by talking about this year's snow survey. What were the findings? How bad is it?
It's not looking terribly hopeful, to be honest. We are, as you mentioned, about 23% below average. And further, with these record warm temperatures that we're seeing in parts of the state, we are actually looking at a snow melt completely within the next 2 to 3 weeks, unless we get a bump up in the form of another snowstorm or two.
All right, I've been bugging the meteorologists. I don't think that's in the forecast. Is this an indicator of how things are going to go? I mean, if we're sitting at where we are now, what does that mean for us the rest of the year?
Well, unfortunately, that December through February or December through March period is really when we get the bulk of our precipitation, both rain and snow. So at this point in time, it's really not looking like we're going to be able to make up the difference unless things change drastically. And as for the short-term forecast, it's not looking too great.
Okay. Was there anything that you were most surprised by or alarmed by as you did your typical surveys for this last time?
I think just the absolutely crazy weather whiplash that we have seen recently. We had second largest October here on record, and then the deepest December on record here at the Snow Lab going back to 1970. And yet we've had also these record long dry streaks that have occurred at the earlier portion of the year. And we had a record dry November as well. So it's this weather whiplash that is kind of surprising and a little bit disappointing in terms of us trying to relieve our drought.
Well, some people think of the drought as being, lacking in rain or snow. That is somewhat accurate. Of course, that leads to that. But what are some of the other factors present that we need to consider?
Yeah, that's right. The rain and snow consideration is definitely correct, but there needs to be what we call a hydrological imbalance, or more of a demand than a supply also for drought as well. And of course, with our activities as humans and a changing climate, that means that hydrological imbalance is growing. And so one of the factors here that can really affect that is actually our forest fires, because they can affect the way the snow melts and the way that the water runs off of the slopes. And of course, that means that the following year, we can have larger fires again, and it's kind of a vicious circle that continues to perpetuate itself.
Wait, okay, so not only are we getting less water, the water is not getting stored or saved in a way that we can use? Is that part of it?
It's just differences in timing. And yeah, to your point, there are some more kind of complicated things that arise from it. For instance, when we have long periods of drought, our soil completely dries out. And that means that even if we get heavy rain, sometimes it's soaked up completely by the soil, which means that it's not running off into the streams and then into our reservoirs. So there is this kind of mounting complexity with our drought that maybe we haven't experienced to the same extent in the past.
So if human activity is making the drought worse, so to speak, what needs to happen? When you look at the big picture and say, these things need to happen now, what are they?
As far as us as ordinary people, we can have a large amount of impact through our daily actions. We can't change the weather. We can't make it rain or snow more so that we can come completely out of the drought. But what we can affect is the way that we use our water on a daily basis. We can choose to conserve more and make sure that we're using less to do the dishes, that we're not watering our lawns as frequently or at all if we're able to do xeriscape. We need to make sure that we can conserve, because every drop that we conserve now will be more water that we have in future months and maybe even years.
Okay, what about on a macro level, water management? Seems like the tools are becoming more important, but you're saying they might be less accurate now?
Some of the tools are still very, very good, and we are making improvements and a lot of headway with them, but that doesn't mean that they're all that good either. So the National Weather Service is constantly updating their models, and they do a very, very good job. But some of the other agencies and some of the smaller agencies, I should say, don't necessarily have those same tools, or they don't have the personnel maybe to help improve their models as much. And so that means that we need to invest not just money, but also people into this problem of drought and water in the West as much as we can.
And what might that look like? Paint a picture for us of the kind of management you see.
Realistically, we have so many different water agencies that are working together. We need larger input from each of them at a large round table, kind of discussion and collaborating together, because there are so many different agencies. But the other thing too is, like I mentioned, we do need more people on to improve measurements. So go out and install new instrumentation, to take a lot of the science that we currently have and implement that in models as well. And it is occurring in some areas, but it needs to occur broadly across California, as well as throughout the entire Western US, in order to help us really address this thing head on as climate change continues.
All right. Well, thank you so very much for talking with us, Dr. Andrew Schwartz from UC Berkeley's Snow Lab. Take care.
Thank you for having me on.
Coming up next, our media partner, San Francisco Standard, is taking a close look at what exactly went wrong when more than 1,000 employees of the San Francisco School District got partial paychecks or not at all, and what's being done to stop it from happening again. We'll be right back.
In commercial break.
In commercial break. All right, stick around. We have another interview with San Francisco Standard reporter right after this.
In 7, 6, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1.
A few weeks after several school board members were recalled, San Francisco Unified is grappling with several crises, from the battle over school admissions to massive budget cuts to impending layoffs. Add to that the unexpected system glitch that led to 1,000 teachers and staff not being paid on time. Our media partner, the San Francisco Standard, has been looking into this as part of its hyperlocal reporting on issues impacting our quality of life and all the things like education that go into building a better Bay Area. Today, the Standard's education reporter Ida Mojadad joins us with the latest in her series of stories on this particular issue. Ida, thanks for your time today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here because I'd like for you to recap for our viewers the payroll disaster that we became aware of last month.
Yeah, it all started in January when the district switched to a new payroll system called Empower SF. It had been building for a few years. They wanted to switch from an antiquated system. And so when they finally did, after some delays due to the pandemic, they were, some teachers were already reporting some issues and other staff too. But it was just kind of bubbling around. There wasn't a lot of action on it. And so staff were really upset with not getting paid and having these delays. And so in mid-March, the teachers union launched a sit-in that ended up lasting for 4 days to urge some action and get some, guaranteed reimbursements and interest payments made on these for these more than 1,000 teachers who were not paid correctly or on time or incorrectly, some other errors that happened.
If I remember, because of this, some people also had like higher tax bills or had their insurance cut off, right? So it wasn't just about the paycheck.
Exactly. It was a lot of other benefits related issues. It's still a bit of a mystery what's going on with the retirement contributions. As for insurance, that ended up being retroactively reinstated, and they will be reimbursed for out-of-pocket costs and, just other sorts of mysteries that have arisen.
So the teachers, legitimately demanded answers, and last night the district, addressed it. I guess the leadership laid out some findings. Tell us what they were. Did they pinpoint blame on something?
In their initial analysis of what went wrong that was presented to the budget committee last night, it seems to revolve around lack of proper staffing and preparation, different departments working on different aspects of the project and not necessarily seeing not everybody seeing a full picture of what was going on. As the chief technology officer put it, is that we weren't seeing the whole, we were parts of the puzzle, but we weren't seeing the whole puzzle piece. And at the same time, because they had delayed it from the beginning of the year to a mid-year launch, that caused a lot of other issues in terms of not being prepared for a mid-year launch.
So Ida, two things. One, has it been rectified, as in the immediate situation? And then two, what's the longer-term solution to prevent this from happening again?
It has sort of been rectified. There are still some people who have, lingering payments that still need to be made. There's some new cases from the latest payday that happened last week. There's still the tax withholding issue with this higher tax bill, sorting that out. And the district has said that it's put more support toward payroll so that people can actually have more humans responding to them, and to verify the paychecks before they go out. They still want to figure out a little bit more about what's happening with the retirement, and also to get a independent investigator.
All right. Did any teachers quit over this? I mean, I ask especially because knowing that they face kind of a staffing shortage like so many other districts.
Yeah, I haven't heard directly from anyone who has directly attributed this as the final reason, but that is what I'm hearing, is that it's highly considered right now. Teachers have already been, severely burnt out from the past 2 years of working in the pandemic and, switching to in-person learning, the pandemic continuing. And so to not get paid is, likely to be the straw that breaks the camel's back for many teachers. And the UESF treasurer last night told the board, there are some very dedicated teachers who are I just want to go to a district so I can get paid, or leaving the profession altogether, especially the younger teachers.
Well, Ida Mojadad, thank you so much for joining us with your report. And also want to let folks know we have links to the San Francisco Standard's other original reporting on our website, abc7news.com. To watch more ABC7 segments featuring the San Francisco Standard's city-focused journalism, check out ABC7 Bay Area streaming TV app and scroll down to the San Francisco Standard shelf. We'll be right back.
In commercial break.
All right. Ida, thank you so much. I know you report on education, so we can finish up here on Facebook Live with a last question about, what else is this district grappling with now? I mean, they've got the 3 new school board members in place. What is the immediate crisis that they're turning their attention to?
The payroll really seems to be the most immediate crisis. They want answers. They want to make sure this doesn't keep happening. They still have to make sure that they put in place a budget that satisfies the state and looks to the long term and these multi-year projections with these enrollment declines that we're seeing across the state and the country, really, in terms of public education. So I would say the payroll and the budget are really top of mind for most of the board and the district right now.
To achieve the budget cuts they need to avoid, some sort of state action like a takeover or insolvency, or going in the red, do they really have to lay off hundreds of teachers? Is that the only way?
It's possible that, many positions will be consolidated because there's been so many staffing vacancies. People are retiring midway through the year. And so, these positions, there's also a lot of positions that haven't been filled. So it's not entirely clear who is actually losing their positions and how many will be formally laid off, but it also depends on their qualification. So it's a bit of a mixed bag right now. There's just an incredible amount of uncertainty.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good thing, nobody has to lose their job, but it's also not a good thing that then you're just eliminating those jobs and not filling them because they're already kind of shorthanded, right? So, all right, we'll be talking with you more in the future. Thank you so much, Ida. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
15 seconds. All right, 15 seconds. Here we go.
Back in 10.
The big
9,
goodbye.
8, 7, 6, 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much for joining us on this interactive show, Getting Answers. We'll be here every weekday at 3, on air and on live stream. Bye-bye.